Hey guys, in this video we're going to talk about whether or not you should buy real estate in a land trust or limited liability company. All right, let's get started. So this is that question, right, that comes up so often with individuals. Hey, I've heard about LLCs, I've heard about land trusts. Well, I'm going to walk you through the differences between these two entities. And at the end, I'm going to show you what I think is my preference when it comes to buying real estate, which entity I prefer to use. And it's based upon 25 years of investing experience in my own investing and those of my clients. All right, so here's the thing. Land trust. Could you buy real estate inside of a land trust? Absolutely, you can buy real estate in a land trust. Now, what are some of the benefits of buying real estate in a land trust? Well, there's no filing fees, okay, when you use a land trust because it's a private document. You set the document or set up the trust. In fact, right before you make your offer, you could create the trust and then you could make the offer in the name of the trust. So that's a positive. Number two, if you set it up the right way, you can have anonymity with your land trust. And so that's a positive, because if I'm buying property and I don't want people to know that I'm the owner, I don't want the tenants to know that I'm the owner, then using a land trust with anonymity, that's a great way to go. Another benefit of using a land trust is if you want to assign ownership. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, if you take title in the name of the trust and you decide, hey, I want to move the ownership of this trust out of me, Clint, being the beneficiary, to an LLC or to a third party, and I don't want anybody to know about it. I don't have to record another deed to transfer title of the property. Land trusts are great for that, because all you have to do is take the beneficial interest that you have, fill out an assignment form, say, I, Clint Coons, hereby assign 100% of my beneficial interest to XYZ LLC or my son Carter, whatever I want to do. You can do that when you have a land trust. The third benefit, there's no tax return for setting up a land trust and taking title inside of this vehicle. So those are some positives of using the land trust. Now, what are the negatives of using the land trust for taking title? Well, some of the negatives that come from using a land trust stem from lack of familiarity. Okay, so you deal with people who do not understand what this is because they've never seen it before. So that can slow down the closing process. You're dealing with a title company, and this is a case of what we call first impression for them. They've never seen one before and they don't know how to handle it. So their legal department gets involved and it can create issues. So I think that is probably the biggest negative of using a land trust, is that lack of familiarity with third parties. And that also extends to not only closing and title companies, they extend to insurers. When you need to get the property insured, they're not quite sure as to what type of entity you're using there. So that's the biggest negative I see in using land trusts for closing. Now, if we're looking at a limited liability company instead, say we want to close in an LLC here. All right. So what are some of the benefits of closing? Actually, hold on. One other thing here. Forgot this. No asset protection with a land trust. Just had a blonde moment. I mean, this is the stupidest thing, right? I forgot to tell you this. With the land trust, you have zero asset protection. So if something goes wrong with that property and someone brings a claim against the trust, that's going to hit you as the beneficiary of that trust. Because when you set up a land trust and I own property inside of there and I get sued, or the trust gets sued as the property owner, that claim runs to the beneficiaries of the trust. Okay, had to get that down, because this is the number one reason why you want to set up a limited liability company. One of the benefits is asset protection with the LLC. So if something goes wrong with the LLC, you're protected from those claims associated with the property. Now, another benefit of using the LLC is similar to the land trust. You can assign ownership with the limited liability company. So instead of us moving the land trust over, you're moving the beneficial interest of the LLC to a third party. With the LLC, you can either go no tax return, or you can have it set, you can choose tax status. Okay, so I can choose my tax status for the limited liability company. So if I want to have it set as a partnership, S Corp, or disregarded entity, I can do that which in turn means that in 2 of those elections, I would have to file a tax return. Now, some people say, well, that's great with the land trust, you don't have to file a tax return. But there are benefits in certain situations to actually filing a tax return for your rental property, especially if it's a commercial property. Multifamily units, you want to be filing returns on the entities that hold those, because when you want to sell, the underwriter for your buyer is going to ask for a copy of that return. So tax reasons, we would look at the LLC. Now, anonymity. Well, you can get anonymity with a limited liability company, but the problem is you're typically going to have to use a 2-entity strategy. So this kind of, is like a positive and maybe a negative at the same time, because it's just not by default built in. In certain situations, you have to take an additional step to obtain that when you're setting that up. And then another benefit of this is that they're well known, familiarity, okay? That is, when you're working with lenders, you're working with title companies, we are working with insurers. When you're using an LLC, they're available in all 50 states. They've been around forever. People take title in them all the time. If you said you own property in an LLC, not a problem. You're going to get that deal done. If you want to refi the property and you're using a non-qualified mortgage, you're going to get that done a lot quicker with an LLC than you will with a land trust. Again, because with the land trust, lack of familiarity. You don't have that with the limited liability company. So I would go with that. Now, the drawback to using an LLC, all right, what is that going to be? It's going to be sometimes what we call costs, the investment that you have to make to get this thing set up, all right? That is, you're going to have to file with the Secretary of State in order to have the LLC. So you just can't make an offer in the name of an LLC unless it's already created. So from that standpoint, some people see that as a negative. But at the end of the day, if you want asset protection, which I suggest you should be looking at, you're going to definitely want to look at using a limited liability company. So then the question comes down to, should you take title in an LLC or a land trust? What do you think my answer is? Well, it's going to be limited liability company in most situations. I know it sounds like an attorney. So here's the deal. When you're buying property, if it's a standard close or you're making the offer and you don't have to come up with the cash immediately, go with the limited liability company. Close in the name of the LLC. It's simple. Now, if you're buying property at auction, all right, where you don't know if you're going to get the property, so maybe you're bidding, you think maybe you'll go to the auction, come home with 2 or 3 properties, who knows? Well, using the land trust, I think, is a preferable route there, because if you get the deal, you just draft up the trust right then and there. I mean, it's simple. My clients do this all the time. You create the trust agreement, you sign it, you go and you make the offer, or you take title in the name of the trust. So it's much quicker to do it that way. Or if you think you're going to be closing on a subject to deal and you don't want the lender to know about who the new owner is because they could accelerate the note, well, land trust is going to make sense for those. So if you're using auction properties, if you're buying subject to an existing mortgage, then I'm going to go with the land trust over the limited liability company in most situations. The other situation I'd look at doing that is if you know that you're going to close on the property and you're immediately going to dump it off to another investor. Again, probably I'd use the land trust versus an LLC, because it's much quicker and simpler to move a land trust to a third party than it is to move the limited liability company. This requires a lot more paperwork and legal work to transfer this LLC than it does just to move the land trust. So you just got to look at the type of deal you're doing. But remember this, if you do go the land trust route, you still need the asset protection down here. So if you're going to keep your properties in that land trust, you're still going to be having an LLC on the backside. So that's why I said for most deals, I'm going with the LLC over the land trust, because you still need it. Guys, I hope you figured that out. I got some good information here on which of those you should use when you're closing on property. If you want to set up a strategy session, check out the show notes. Also, I teach a one-day tax and asset protection event for real estate investors. I also have a link in the show notes for that. You can register for it. It'll show you the next upcoming live event that I have. Or here's the thing, you can go on to that event. Not only am I going to teach you about land trusts and LLCs and things like that and various real estate strategies to help you acquire more real estate, I mean, these are things that I wish I knew 25 years ago, that it took me 10 years to finally discover. I'm going to be sharing those same strategies with you so you don't make the same mistakes that I did when I first started investing, so it can basically supercharge your investing. But more importantly, I'm going to have a team of attorneys there and tax professionals that will be answering your specific questions as they come up during my presentation. So you're going to be able to walk away from that event with information that is specific to you. I hope to see you there.